Hello everyone, and welcome to the first installment of my new series about books I read as a teenager that I reread. So this series, I figure I'll explain to you a little bit, is about books that I read in middle school and high school, my thoughts on them from what I can remember, what stuck with me about them, versus what I think of them now, because the goal is to find them and reread them. So yeah, my name is Sarah, and let's get started. So, first of all, I may look a little different from when you've been seeing me recently, because this video is being filmed a little bit in advance, because I'm not sure when I'm going to start the series, but the books that I read, I checked out from the library. I have to return them, like, day after tomorrow or something, and I would like to have everything fresh in my mind rather than have to check them out again. So my hair might be long, it might be blue, it might be turquoise, it might be orange. I really hope not. I mean, not a huge fan of the color orange. Anyways, I don't know when, oh, there go all the books off my lap. I don't know when this video is going to go up, but I wanted to record it now. So yeah, it is September the 14th. Blast from the past, more than likely. Alright, so the first book I read, or the first, actually this is two books, it's a duology that go together, are the Carbon Diaries, 2015 and 2017. Let me get my notes out and I can tell you all about them. I read them, let's see here, my handy dandy notebook. Let me see here. The author of these books both is, I believe it's Saci Lloyd, it's pronounced S-A-C-I Lloyd, and they were published in 2008 and 2009 respectively, and I read them about 2010, 2011, so I would have been around 15 or 16 years old. My memories of these books, from what I could remember, because I remember seeing them in the young adult section, the small young adult section in my college library, my university library, and thinking, oh, I remember those are so good. Alright, let's see here. I remember thinking that their band was so cool because the main characters, as you can see, they are in a punk rock band. I think you can see that. And I remember relating to the romantic subplot that goes throughout both books, which is kind of ridiculous because at age 15, 16, I would have either never had a boyfriend or had just broken up with my first boyfriend of like 1 month. And, you know, very, very much a first romance. Nothing special, so I don't know why I related with the romantic subplot, because there's a lot more going on there than I would have had any experience with. But anyways, my other notes was I was confused by the term trainers, because these books take place in London. Well, not just in London, but England. The second book takes place in parts of Europe, but namely the UK, namely London. And I remember being confused by the term trainers, which you may or may not know is the term for sneakers, or like, I guess sneakers, yeah, that's what I would call them. Tennis shoes, I guess. I think they're a little bit nicer than tennis shoes. I'm not really sure what a tennis shoe is, I just know that's another word people use. Alright, so that's what I remember about these books. What did I think about them? The first one I thought was really good. There's a lot of, like, I'll show you. It's written in diary format, and you can see that, like, she tapes things into her diary a little bit, and it's dated. And I do remember when I read these the first time in about 2010, thinking 2015 was so far away, 2017 was even further away, and here we are in 2017. Most of this book takes place in the past at this point, which is kind of crazy. The basic premise, I guess I should tell you that, is about global warming. The idea is that to reduce their carbon footprint, the whole of England goes kind of onto a carbon diet, I would say. They get these cards that are kind of like credit cards, and they have a certain amount of carbon points that they can spend each month and then total for the year. The idea is that if you buy something that had to be shipped overseas, you know, a lot of travel, a lot of carbon involved in producing it and shipping it, it costs more carbon points, you know. So if you buy asparagus from Peru or whatever, you know, exotic produce, if you take the bus to work, you know, that's going to cost more. And that's the idea, just to, instead of really using money, they're paying for things with the carbon that they have. Honestly, now, the more I think about it, the less I'm sure of how their economy still functions. But regardless, I think it's a pretty cool idea, especially with where we are now with global warming. And it's just her account of what happens to society as that happens. It starts off pretty much exactly the way you would expect it to. People are kind of freaking out. They're like, how do we function in this new society? You know, I can't drive my special car to work anymore. Her mom has a Saab, I believe. And, you know, it's just them reacting to that and what kind of strain it puts on her family. Her sister starts selling things on the black market to make money to, you know, survive. Her sister's a little bit older than her. And how do they keep their band going, which obviously they need electricity for their amps. They need to be able to tour, which they're not to that point yet in the first book. Then there starts to be protests because the government starts shutting off their water and electricity because the government can't manage what's going on, and there's a shortage of water. And since global warming is happening, the summers are hotter and the winters are colder, which is what scientists do believe will happen with global warming. So water's scarce. Fuel to heat is scarce because fuel, you're burning it and creating carbon. So that's extremely expensive. So yeah, that's what this first one's about. My thoughts on it after reading it, I think it's a little bit dated. They use a lot of terms like, I can't find it in here to show you. Well, here's a picture of what their carbon cards look like right here. Anyways, they use a lot of terms like very early, like text terms. I don't see any in here. Of course, they were all over when I was first reading this, but like school spelled S-K-O-O-L and then dis, D-I-S, which I think is more normal than S-K-O-O-L, school, because that's more of a vernacular thing than a, but there's a lot of like very early 2000s text talk, which I guess was the author's way of trying to make it seem more futuristic, but it definitely makes it kind of dated. I wouldn't say it makes the book any worse. As far as representation goes, there are a lot of main characters of color, a lot of side characters of color. It's a very diverse cast. The cover honestly shows the main character Laura as white, but I wasn't really sure reading it if she was, because she makes a few comments about white kids and white girls, you know, like when looking at groups, and it sounded like she wasn't white, just the way she said it. And it was never specific to her race, but I didn't really think of her as white, even though the cover shows that. Both of them show that. So, I mean, according to the cover, she is, but, like, most of the other members of her band and stuff like that. I think there might have been something in the second book that said she was white, but I'm not sure. As for LGBT representation, not the best. Their one neighbor, Kieran, is gay, and that's it. And you might think, oh, that's not such a big deal. I mean, it is to me. I like all the LGBT representation, but he starts a dating service, and his focus group, that's what they're called, unless I missed something, everybody's straight, and I thought that was a little bit strange that he'd be running a dating company and not. And I mean, there are mentions to like other gay people in it, but like she doesn't mention any of them by name. It's just like, oh, Kieran was dancing with people down at a gay club or something like that. You could say he's a stereotype. He's very dramatic, but at the same time, I feel like they fleshed him out well enough that it doesn't bother me. But it did kind of bug me. He was like apparently the only gay person in all of London. But it's, you know, there isn't anything I would say outrageously offensive in it. So that's the first book. The second book is The Carbon Diaries, 2017. It goes 2 years in the future. She's 18 now. She was 16 in the first book. And she's in college, and she's trying to, you know, keep up with the band. Their band's still going. Their band's called the Dirty Angels, by the way. That's the name of their band. And things are just kind of heating up. It's more and more of the same. Just things are kind of ramping up. There are more protests. There's water shortages going on in Europe. There are refugee crises because of water shortage, because of political unrest. Europe has started doing the carbon rationing as well, and I think the US is not, in a way that is very ironic because of the way we are. This author, I don't think she's American. I'm pretty sure she's also British. Definitely had a handle on Americans. They weren't doing it essentially because they'd lose money from the oil industry, which sounds about right to me. But anyway, so this one has more to do with her going to protests. They go on an international tour and everything just kind of goes sideways. They get caught up in protests. She goes on her first tour, her first international tour. They go to France, and I think they're going to go to a few other countries, but they get stopped and they end up having to flee. And she ends up in a camp, like a detainment camp essentially, for a while, and everything just kind of goes sideways. And just through a series of disastrous circumstances, she ends up having to go to Italy because Adi, her boyfriend's sick. And they end up getting caught in a detainment camp essentially because they're known to be protesters. And she's stuck there for quite a while, and she finally makes it home, and her parents don't want her to go back to school, but she does, and it's just more and more and more, and she's just trying to, get on with her life. She's obviously scarred and traumatized by this. And it's just what happens after that as well. That's about halfway through the book, or a little bit towards the end of the, maybe about there, is when they come home, and then what happens after that. Let me see here. I don't really remember much about reading this book. It's, like I said, it's also in diary form. It's got things taped into it. Oh, let me find it. Where'd he go? Their dog, Pulce Guevara, they find him in Italy. Pulce, I'm probably butchering that, is Italian for flea, so that's what they name him, because he's a flea bag. He was one of my favorites. I love dogs. I love animals in books too. I don't know what I thought about this book when I read it. I don't remember. I probably thought it was crazy. Oh, that'll never happen. That's insane. And another thing I should probably warn about, kind of like a trigger warning, I guess that's exactly what it is. There's a lot of mentions of the far right and neo-Nazis in this. There is, I'm assuming, a fictional group. I'm not going to name them just because I don't know for sure whether it's something the author made up or actual group, but they protest. It's the same kind of things we're seeing now in Charlottesville, and unfortunately. And I have a feeling that as a high schooler, as like being 15 or 16, I was probably just like, that would never happen. Where did these people come from? Very, very naive. Also, I probably was pretty upset with her breaking the law, because I was still at that age where it's like, it's the law. You can't break it regardless. And they're going to protests and stuff like that. Yeah, like I said, really the only thing I remembered from this book was the romantic subplot, which of all the things in this book is kind of ridiculous. She quasi-predicted Hurricane Harvey, which was kind of terrifying. There was a huge hurricane/flood in the southern part of the U.S. near the Gulf of Mexico in this book partway through, which was really freaky. What else? I think that was about it. I would definitely recommend these books. I enjoyed them. If you have a teen who's interested in climate change, punk rock, protesting, social problems, anything like that, I definitely recommend these. I would say they're good for adults as well. It depends on what you feel comfortable with reading. If you don't want to read about neo-Nazis and that sort of resurgence, you could read the first book, and you really don't have to read the second book. This ends well enough that you're not going to feel like you have to read the second book. But there are, I think, a few mentions in this book of it, but nothing extensive. But in this book, there is definitely. So yeah, that's my review. I apologize for being so rambly, but I really wanted to get this done before I forgot everything. I should have written a script. Anyways, thank y'all for watching, and I hope you'll come back for the next one. Bye!